So for the 10th Penguin Modern, we have an Irish poet, Patrick Kavanagh, and I surprisingly like this. So first off, I have a soft spot for Irish writers because there aren't many. Ireland is a hard place to get good education. You can tell from my name, Liam. I'm, Irish by heritage. So it's nice to have an Irish poet. I read Seamus Heaney when I was, in school doing my exams when I was 16 years old, and his poems are the ones that stayed with me. Of all the other kind of poets we studied, although there wasn't that much passion in his poems, they're all about just looking at the river, digging up potatoes. The potatoes was one that I remember we analysed, and I didn't mind it. It was actually quite peaceful. And what a lot of Irish poetry does is communicate the peacefulness of rural life that I think is harder to find these days. It's harder to find anything about it. In the technological age, we don't have these moments of peacefulness with nature. And I think that can really come across in the writing of Irish poets. It has got this modesty about it that I find in some Southern Gothic writers, like in As I Lie Dying by Faulkner. It's, aside from the gloomy aspects and the dark comedy of that story, there's some similarity I see with the rural Irish poets and Southern Gothic writers talking about working class families living in the country, just very close to the just the vastness of the marshes. There's something quite interesting about that as a setting. There's something very real and very timeless. There's something very timeless about that. I sometimes wonder whether the books that we read about cities and, living your life as like as an adult, like postmodern literature has been including stuff like emails and phones, and people are writing books about social media now, like more and more, and it's all interesting and relevant, but at the same time I wonder whether how timeless it's going to be, whether like technology, these things are going to be replaced, and it's books like these that might stay. But anyways, let's get to describing this. So these are all poems about kind of growing up on a farm, and the main thing I want to tell you about this is that there's one big poem in this, The Great Hunger, called The Great Hunger. It's that much, like these many pages. This many pages are one poem. There's like I guess like a mini epic poem there, and it's written in I think 15 parts, and each part is about one of these pages long. And it almost chronicles the timeline of a young boy growing up in a family that is poor on a farm. And there's something just very interesting about him not being able to find a job and trying to find a wife and have kids. It's like there's something quite nice about it. It's very simple. It's the simple rural life is communicated in that, the slowing of time and everything. I won't read any of that poem because, as you can see, it's quite long. It's a prose poem. It's like a narrative. It's like a story. But what I will instead read is my favorite short poem here. Consider the grass growing as it grew last year and the year before, cool about the ankles like summer rivers, when we walked on a May evening through the meadows to watch the mare that was going to foal. So there's just nice stories like that in these short poems, telling us to reflect on nature and the birth and death of life. There's nothing more or less to it. There's sometimes poems about the church and God and the local community, but it's always very homely in that way. It's talking about the simple life, and it's very straightforward. There's nothing very noticeably lyrical, or there's no complexity really to these poems. It's just to convey the atmosphere of living in the countryside. And as I grow older, I think I'm I enjoy these poems more. I think if you really want a poem with message, then it's not here. These aren't trying to tell you anything. They are just trying to show you what it is like to live. And that's a very big distinction. So if you want poems which have interesting methods or strong messages, then don't come here. But if you want poems which try to describe in the simplest way what it is to live without anything but nature, just the natural world, then these poems are great. And The Great Hunger is a very interesting poem. I'm glad that they flagged it in this collection. And I haven't heard of this poem before, but it's a really, really nice poem. I think maybe Seamus Heaney should have been in this collection, not to be mean to Patrick Kavanagh, but still, I really like this. I gave it 4 stars because I found it more interesting and more unique than most poems I read, and it doesn't try to do too much. With poetry, I often find that if I don't love it, it's because they tried to do something which didn't work. Like they tried to go too far or they did too much or something. This doesn't try. This just is, and there's a peace in that. This is almost like a simple form of poetry trying to show a simple thing, not trying to tell you anything other than what it is and about how life can be when we just live in the present. Because all of these poems are about living in the present and just getting by day. And I like that. It's almost like everyday poetry in a way. And there's a lot of melodrama in poetry which just seems very disconnected from reality, but these are very real. And I just really liked how these were verse poems. And anyways, here are some final bits that you might want to look at in case you wanted to. And there's quite a lot of poems in here as well. There's a good deal here. Nothing too long, and so it's easy to get quickly through them. That's all. That's the entire contents. So yeah, if you want simple poetry about rural life, then Seamus Heaney you can go for, but Patrick Kavanagh's The Great Hunger is quite an interesting example of a prose poem that chronicles the life of a character. And I'm pretty happy I read this. This is one of the better Penguin Moderns of the 10. We've done 10 so far. I've actually read 12. I haven't been reading them because I've just got a backlog of reviewing them. Those are the other 2 up there. And once I catch up, I'm going to be doing it as I read them as quickly as I can. Because I find when I review things just after I read them, I have all my feelings and thoughts ready and I can get things just across much more clearly. And everything will be streamlined and I won't have to kind of wait and remember what I read. So I think it'll be better for everyone. Anyways, that's Patrick Kavanagh's The Great Hunger. Great poetry from Ireland there. Happy reading.